And hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Michael Harding, and I'm here with On the Arts. Now, a lot of you know that we were performing on the arts, or not performing, but we were broadcasting on the arts last year, starting in about December of last year. And we were on for a few months, and then we took a little bit of a hiatus over the summer. I'm happy to let you know that I have been working up at the Shakespeare Festival, which is why I wasn't able to broadcast, but I am back for the fall. On the Arts really took off last year in that people were really excited to hear from the guests that we had on the show. We had a wide variety of guests, such as Mayor John Pike on the political spectrum of the arts, and we also had painters and musicians and actors and theater owners and a museum curator. Our job here at On the Arts is to blow the lid off of all of these wonderful little secrets that we have around here in St. George and southern Utah in general. Now, a lot of people asked last year if I was going to do hard-hitting journalism on this show, if I was going to blow the lid off of conspiracies and secrets and things of that sort. Well, my answer is yes. We're going to do some hard-hitting journalism about the arts. It could be a favorite experience, or it could also be an experience that was really frustrating, was back when I was at the Warehouse Theater in South Carolina, and we were getting ready to put on a performance of The Miser by Moliere. And the artistic director stood out in front of the audience to give his pre-show speech, and he said he wanted to thank everybody for coming and supporting live theater. And he said it really disturbed him when somebody stopped him on the street and said, "Your theater is wonderful. You do fantastic things. It's such a wonderful little secret of Greenville, South Carolina." And his response was, "Thank you. I appreciate the fact that you like the work we do." But he wasn't happy at all that it was a secret. He wanted to make sure that the opportunities to experience the theater that the Warehouse Theater put out there was appreciated and was known. So the hard-hitting journalism that I'm going to be doing here on the Arts at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays is uncovering the secrets, the wonderful little secrets and gems that we have here in southern Utah. Now, we have a very special guest today, someone that I do consider to be a very good friend, somebody I've had a wonderful time getting to know, Lisa Wolpe. Lisa, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, Michael.
Hi there. No, and that was actually me being very sneaky, just trying to make sure I had the technology right and made sure that you were coming through on the radio. I always like to... What was that?
I'm a secret.
Absolutely, you're a secret, and you're a secret that I'm really glad I discovered. I'm going to tell you that in the arts, there are a lot of very interesting people. That's something that I've come to learn and come to love about being an artist myself, an actor and a director and a playwright. And I grew up with a concert pianist for a brother. He was one of those that he was practicing 8 hours a day when he was 5 years old. He was very, very dedicated. And a lot of people would always ask me, "Isn't it wonderful to have so much beautiful music in your house all the time?" And my response was always, "You've never heard a musician practice, have you? Hearing the same 5 measures over and over and over, it's not always a joy." But the personalities of the people that come in and put together this work are just wonderful, and you have some very fascinating people. I don't know if I've mentioned before, but my father was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and my brother's a concert pianist, and I'm an actor. So my father is a very confused man, but he certainly is appreciative of the work that we do. Now, my brother, when he was studying piano to become a concert pianist, he went to Eastman School of Music, the Eastman Conservatory of Music in Rochester, New York. And I went to visit him one time, and in his dorm building, in the apartments that they had built for the students, I noticed that there were no right angles anywhere in the building. And he told me that the architect who put together that building for the students came in with the attitude that artists were interesting off people. So he wanted to make sure that they weren't constrained by 90-degree angles. And I thought, what a wonderful view of artists, that we try to look at things from a different perspective. Well, I'll tell you, there are a lot of interesting artists that I couldn't wait to work with as an actor. I will let you talk in just a second, Lisa, I promise. But all of these people that I couldn't wait to work with, and some of them are, very established people. Some of them are people that I've heard of, up and coming and such. And sometimes it can be a disappointment when you work with people because of their personality, or sometimes you can be absolutely inspired with people you've always wanted to work with. You also discover all of these gems with people you've never met or heard of. Well, I'm happy to say that the name Lisa Wolpe was one that I've heard for years, and just through friends. It's a very small world, the world of the arts and the world of theater. And I've heard this name. I heard of this wonderful actress, this wonderful dramaturg, this wonderful dedicateur, if you will, to Shakespeare. And
Dedicateur.
a
I
dedicateur,
like that.
Shakespeare made up word, so can I. And I don't know if that
Yeah,
works or
I
not.
like that one.
But
Great word.
I have to say that in working at the festival this summer, I looked at the cast list and saw that Lisa Wolpe was there, and I was extremely excited to meet this actress. And I remember the first rehearsal, I saw who she was, and I sat on a table just a little ways away. And the moment she opened her mouth, she was commanding of the language, commanding of the space. And Lisa, not to blow your ego or anything here, but I have to tell you, you deliver one of the finest Shylocks I've ever seen this summer in Merchant of Venice, as well as you are an absolute pleasure to work with in Henry VI Part 1, where you play multiple roles. So, Lisa, after that introduction, welcome to On the Arts.
Thank you. That was so nice of you. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, I am a dedicateur indeed, and I think both of our fathers were in the military, so if you and I are commanding, then that's by lineage.
And what branch is your father?
He fought with the Royal Winnipeg Rifles in World War II.
Wow. Okay, I didn't even know that about you. That's one of the reasons I love doing this show. I get to find these things out. Was your father supportive of your foray into the arts?
My father died when I was 4.
Gotcha.
So that foray ended then. But I just think it does, as you say with your brother, I don't know, rehearsing music, it's a lot of discipline, isn't it? But that's disciple, which means following the path. And, there are no right angles. But angles is another way of saying angels. If you think about Metatron, who was one of the sort of intelligent design mythic gods. Do you know about Metatron?
I don't. Go into a little more detail on that.
Sort of the god of mathematic proportion and intelligent design. And so angles and the Star of David and all of the triangle with the eyeball in it from Egyptian religious belief systems all have to do with the harmony of the universe having something to do with mathematics. And so Metatron is the god of all of that proportion, the golden mean, etc.
Gotcha.
Anyway, it has a lot to do with Shakespeare and why the globe was built the way it was.
As
in angles.
An open air, kind of almost a wooden O, but it certainly does have the wide angles as part of it.
Yeah, and the proportions to go on with it. Now, this is very esoteric, but so is Shakespeare. And as you know, I am a geek, and that's why I like you, because you, too, are something of a dedicateur.
We are the geeks, and we are proud of it. That's right. I remember.
You're nerds.
And Lisa, I was so incredibly flattered. It was, I believe, in the middle of our very first read-through of Henry VI Part 1. I was intimidated by you. I'll be real honest with you, having heard your name and such, and hearing you read so beautifully. And you actually came up to me and introduced yourself. And you were as commanding as you are with the language and as an incredibly powerful presence. You were one of the warmest actors I've ever met for a first time. I felt a kinship, which I thought was really wonderful.
I know. We became friends immediately. I think because we're both text bunnies, and we love to think like that.
Yeah, I remember in the rehearsal, I remember we were not arguing, but we were putting forth some thoughts over the difference between the word pray, P-R-E-Y, and pray, P-R-A-Y. And, to a lot of people, that would just be this insignificant little detail in the script. But when you think about it, the two meanings can play off of each other or play on top of each other. And as I was having a grand old time talking about it with the director, I looked over at you, and you were just smiling. And I thought, this is a friend right here.
These are a few of my favorite things.
And Lisa, tell me. Oh, no, I was going to say, you are such a fantastic dedicateur of Shakespeare. I'm going to use that word as much as possible now, just so you know.
I, too, will use it.
What started your fascination with this bard?
Oh, the capacity to hold human experience, thought, and feeling in a word. I was a journalist, so it was antithetical to some of the stuff I was writing. And then I met Kristen Linklater and Tina Packer and the people at Shakespeare and Company, Natsuko Hama and Mary Conway. And they became the four women who taught me so much, you know. And I did that for 20 or 30 years. So master teachers are the key to really enjoying this kind of thing, I think, because you can sort of join the Hogwarts society of your choice.
Right. Well, you mentioned Shakespeare and Company. I certainly know who they are, and anyone in the theater, particularly the classical theater, would know who that is. Explain to us what that company is and what makes them special.
I think a lot of people saw the old John Barton tapes that he did with David Suchet and Ian McKellen and Judi Dench, the teaching tapes that are not new anymore, but they were great. Well, John Barton's protege was an actress at the Royal Shakespeare Company called Tina Packer. And Tina came to the United States and got a lot of money together and some master teachers, including Kristen Linklater, who's from the Orkney Islands and has this vigorous physical, emotional, vocal release technique that she developed. And so they had John Broome for dance, and they had Susan Dibble for choreography, and they had clown teachers, Mary Conway and others. And it was just a collaborative web of ways into esoteric wisdom by sort of dancing the text and doing stage combat with the text and making argumentative points with the folio work, and just sort of an expert cauldron of chefs in the kitchen who knew how to cook up some classic Shakespeare, but added a kind of an American emotional force, which the British were not doing at that time. This is in the late 70s.
Right.
So then I got my equity card there in 1982, touring to school children in 3 states. We did 25,000 school children in a van in 3 months. And then, I lived in New York City, and all the master teachers worked and taught there. So I continued work in Red-Nosed Clown and Linklater Voice, and actually started crossing gender. I played Malvolio for Natsuko Hama's workshop back in, 1984 or something like that. That was my first cross-gender role. I mean, other than playing Rosalind and Viola, which in and of themselves are crossing gender experiences, I think. In terms of performative gesture, I think a good Rosalind or a Viola will be studying some of that, how to appear to be a man when you have to be.
That's actually something I wanted to broach with you. Looking at your resume, and I have your website pulled up right now, actually, and I'm looking over a lot of your experience and such. You certainly have done a lot of gender crossing. In fact, I have to tell you, I'm a little envious. The roles you've played are ones I'm aspiring to play. My gosh, you've got a list of them here.
What do you want to play next, Michael?
Next?
What do you want to play next?
I'm going to tell you, after seeing Othello at the Shakespeare Festival, I want to dig my teeth into Iago. I just want to play that psychology. It's just so fascinating to me. Just for our listeners, something that is common knowledge when you're playing a villain, you can't think that you're playing the villain. You have to take the perspective that what you're doing is right. You have to understand what your character is doing, what they're going for, and really put yourself into the situation. And I'll tell you, Iago fascinates me, just absolutely fascinates me. He's doing absolutely evil things, manipulating people emotionally and intellectually and even physically when it comes to giving a seizure to Othello. That just fascinates me that someone could do that and feel justified or know that they weren't justified and end up justifying it. Iago is just a fascinating study for me, so I desperately want to take that on, as well as many others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that you mentioned earlier that Shakespeare encompasses the human experience. There you go.
Yeah. They say Iago's a motiveless villain. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if you slept with my wife, if you promised me a job and then ripped it out from under me, if I was a racist, you can put yourself in a character's shoes and have every motive in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I also think Iago's derived from the character of Vice, and as classical actors, you just go on stage and go, I'm expected to play the devil, and if I can humanize him a little bit, the devil's always charming on stage. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I have played Lucifer. I have played Richard III. I played Iago. Playing evil is one of the more charismatic rides.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I'm very much a character actor, so I get a lot of the quirky side actors. Boy, those ones that you can really dig, or side roles, I should say, when you can really dig your teeth into psychology. Not that the roles I play played haven't had those. But you mentioned how Shakespeare encompasses human behavior and such. How would you react to the statement, the reason Shakespeare's plays are still around is because he created a primer, if you will, of the human experience?
He or she, whoever wrote it, we don't know who wrote it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just a human experience. It's this kind of brilliant syntax that excites the mind and quickens the heart and makes the blood move. It's like great music, moves you. And that's what's so cool about it. And portals seem to open up, and people have extraordinary experiences when they're, meditating at that rate. It's like running through a rosary really fast, plunging into every prayer with an absolute conversation with an angel,
Right. I love that, a
Well,
conversation
really,
with an angel.
Well, I think there's something inspirational and divine about it all. Obviously, a lot of people here in the United States traveled with just two books, the Bible and Shakespeare, and they both have great stories in them. But it's the way they're written, I think, that make you feel like there's something bigger out there.
Well, I'll tell you, this is the second summer in a row. Last summer we did Guys and Dolls at the Shakespeare Festival, and the actress who came in and played a prominent role in Guys and Dolls, she had never acted in Shakespeare before. She had seen a few shows, but she had never acted in it, and she wasn't even cast in one of the Shakespeare shows. And it was really wonderful to see her. One night she was going to understudy in one of them, and she just came to observe a rehearsal of Romeo and Juliet. And to see her afterwards, there was this genuine joy and spark in her eyes. And, she looked at me and she just said, I never understood the beauty of the music of Shakespeare.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that we have another gentleman in the festival this year who is part of Big River, our musical offering, and it was the same experience. It was actually backstage of Henry VI, Part 1, and this individual is actually an opera singer, a very, very accomplished opera singer, but had never done a straight play, and of course never done a Shakespeare. And he was just in awe, and I saw him just watching all of the other actors just smiling, and I asked him, what was so charming for him, and he just said, I had no idea. In a rehearsal, he watched us as actors work around the language and pull things out of the language and the words, and it was the magic was opened up for him.
Yeah. It's like having 20 people use their wet fingers to make songs on wine glasses in a kind of a concert of harmonies. It's like spinning plates in a circus. There's so many words that are repeated and that are thematic and that are fun or that are new, or names of people, lists of things. It's really, you just get everything to resonate at the same time. All the different Henrys and Margaret and, all the different, well, I'm just talking about art. Well, you're a bastard. What does it feel like to resonate the bastard in all that armor that you wear? I mean, what's your contribution here as an angel of the war?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, just so the listeners know, I do play a character called the Bastard of Orleans, and it was actually a lot of fun putting him together because, of course, when you say bastard today, there's a certain kind of person that's expected. When you look historically, the term bastard was actually quite an honor. It meant that you had royal blood. You weren't necessarily a legitimate child, but you had royal blood. And I actually approached the role that way, looking at the language, and he actually, if you look at the language for the Bastard of Orleans, he's very utilitarian in a nice guy way for the Prince Dauphin. He moves the story along. He introduces Joan of Arc, and he's, a nice guy. The director pulled me aside, and he just said, look, no, let's play the word bastard. Let's have some fun. And I started playing the role as someone who was really resentful of Joan of Arc taking all of my thunder. And all of a sudden, the language lent itself to me just being snide and sarcastic and showing how I didn't trust her. It was a blast working on.
And you have a great outfit.
Yeah, about 35 pounds of armor. I was looking at it, and boy, I clank all over the place. I'm kind of like the Tin Man, but I really do enjoy working.
Yeah, no, that's a great look.
Thank you. I'm going to broadcast pictures of myself on this. But let's talk about your roles. How many are you playing here in Henry VI?
3. I have two female warriors and an old man. And the old man is Joan of Arc's father. And the first chick I do is Lady Bedford, who I have a Game of Crohn's wig for, this long white braided wig, which is really fun.
You look like
And I get to
Khaleesi
climb
just a little
walls.
bit.
Yeah, exactly, by design. And I get to have a broadsword and do a little bit of fighting. And then I play Lady Lucy, who has a lot of messages to deliver. And yeah, I don't have much to do, but it's a good series of cameos. What do you call small roles?
I guess cameos. Yeah, walk-ons. I
Yeah,
don't know.
cameos. Hi, this is me in a different outfit.
We're the spice.
Yeah, we wear cloaks and stand in the breeze.
And
No, that's an interesting play. I've never been in Henry VI Part 1 before, so that was great. And working with Henry Warren as he's the Bard Whisperer, so
absolutely.
this was great. It was a new play with an old master.
Well, I'll tell you, your performances, you play 3 different roles, and you do them all with aplomb. I'm certainly not going to give away the ending of the shows. I'm going to try not to give away any particular points. But I will say, you deliver so many powerful moments in Henry VI, and I am not forgetting Merchant of Venice. Trust me, we're going to get to that in a moment. But with Henry VI, there are many, many prominent deaths, as there are in Shakespeare histories. And I will tell you, it's just wonderful watching you ride the language. And there's a particular moment that I'm not even going to say. A lot of actors may be, I don't know, superstitious. Do you mind if I mention a particular moment?
No.
Gotcha. There's a moment where a great warrior is fallen on stage and finally gets beaten. And you play a character who comes on stage basically to find this person, to find out what happened. And the body is revealed to you. And Lisa, it's an absolute pleasure to watch how you go from speaking so strongly to watching your entire demeanor change when you realize that this character has been killed. It is, for me, one of the most powerful moments that I experience on stage, just watching this.
Oh, wow, thank you.
That's skill.
That actor is a magnificent actor who's carrying the show, and he's dead there with his child, and there's a lot to work with, a lot of people on stage that I really respect to talk to, and then the audiences are great. They listen to everything. So I'm always heartwarmed if I just turn a phrase and you get a laugh or even applause from Utah audiences who just lean in and listen and then get up in the morning and come to seminars at 9 in the morning to talk about it. There's never met a more enthusiastic Shakespeare tribe than what's congregating here. But thank you for your compliments. I mean, these are very short scenes, so I think it's a great training to nail something in a page or two, and I always do something wrong and embarrass myself. But,
don't we all?
We try.
Right. Well, those are some gems that you have on stage with these smaller characters. And again, I'm not shying away from the fact that you're doing some gender crossing. I do want to talk about that in a little bit as well. But I'd like to jump now to Merchant of Venice, wherein you're taking one of the starring roles in that, the character of Shylock, written ostensibly for a man. It's a male character. I shouldn't say written for a man. I should say it's a male character. And you deliver a very, very powerful performance. Can you tell us a little bit about preparing for a role that people are going to be expecting a certain kind of casting?
Oh, well, there's a lot of fear that comes up in me if I think I'm not welcome in a community. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So there's that. That's the biggest part, is just the anticipation of being rejected. And then that kind of inner voice that says, if you're not a creative genius, then quit right now because you know what to play. You love this play. They cast you already. You already have the part. Now it's your job to do it. And nobody has to agree with you, but you have to give 100% as yourself from your gut. So I did, and, it's not perfect, but well, for one thing, you've got over 35 years of playing male roles. And then for the other thing, I have my father's family are rabbis back to the 1600s. And for the third thing, women haven't been given big leading roles very much here in Utah, so I can't afford to screw it up. I got to hold the door open for the next young woman or older woman who get a chance at something like a Romeo or a Hamlet or a Shylock and are actually granted permission to play it. It's so much, it's so important. Last night, as I came out of Merchant, I met 3 kids from Logan who, 2 were, I think, 9 and 10 years old, sisters. One played Antonia, the other played Shylock, and then their 9-year-old brother had also played Shylock. and these kids were running through all the Shakespeares and they're bringing competition work here in September.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
the kids in the family, and they were just, fangirls and boy, and wanted their program signed and wanted to talk about the play, and were so thrilled that they'd seen me play it because I'm female, and that so I said, Skype me anytime, and we became friends. And a lot of the little kids that have stayed after are kids who are doing Shakespeare and other kinds of work on stage and on the internet that are really jazzed about the gender bending and think that the puzzle of the play of Merchant of Venice is still worth conversing about, especially in a primarily Mormon community where, there's a lot of horrible Christians in the play, and there's the audience looking at horrible representations of, behavior on the Jewish side and on the Christian side, both, female and male side, both. And there's something subversive about having a woman play the other in a world where women get so few roles and so little stage time anyway, and where the roles that women are usually playing, victim, wife, girlfriend, whore, have become a little bit stereotypical and tedious, and people want to play the prince or the philosopher or the villain or the underdog or the other, and there's just the best roles, I think. I mean, Othello's a good role, Iago is better. Antonio's a great role, Shylock is better. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Romeo's a good role, Mercutio is better. I just always like the hot, fast-thinking ones. You know what I mean? Don't you? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Absolutely.
I could play someone more stable. But even as I get older and people are starting to talk about me playing Prospero, I'm like, wow, does Prospero even talk to anybody face-to-face? I mean, he screams at Caliban a little bit. But mostly it's angry monologues that turn inward and fall into themselves dissuasively. I don't know if is he the most fun to play? It's almost more, I've played Lear. Lear is fun. I mean, you can really get into it with another actor on stage. That's always fun.
Well, that's where one of the things I love about you, Lisa, is you're talking about the fun of playing these roles, and I absolutely agree with you. I'd like to submit that a lot of people hear, oh my gosh, this is going to be gender bent and it's going to be weird or things of that sort. I'd like to suggest that a character like Iago, for example, or even Shylock, somebody who is so invested in what may actually become an overzealous goal, that could be a male or a female. I know just as many males as females who really go for it in something that I may not consider to be a moral thing, or I may not completely understand. Same thing on, other characters. Othello, somebody who's an outsider who has been wronged or is being accused of something or being manipulated, could be male or female.
Absolutely.
And that's...
I'm watching a really cool series right now, Sandra Oh and Fiona Shaw, stalking a female serial killer, or an assassin of inventive methodologies. And these women are killing it on this death show. I mean, I'm a little squeamish, but there's the murderess is alive, in many women. I don't know, Lady Macbeth. I don't know. It's hard to talk about gender because for the Shakespeare plays, which were, written for men to play, the stereotypes are just so broad. I mean, Cleopatra's such a drag queen, but I don't know any women who behave like that. You know what I mean? Women don't bounce off the walls like that, not even in the worst time of the month.
Right.
I don't think. I don't know what's wrong with her.
Well, unless they're Cleopatra, I guess. I don't know.
Well, but Cleopatra had many children and spoke many languages and was the most powerful woman in the world. Is that as capricious as that? I don't know. She's actually a serious, huge person, a priestess of sorts, a murderer, true. I don't know. I didn't know her. But I've played her, and it's magnificent to have that kind of ascendance. It goes way beyond gender because it has to do with being partly divine. Her mother is Isis, and Iris, her handmaiden, is the rainbow bridge to the gods. And she doesn't so much commit suicide as ascend, as does her folks. That's a magic, an Egyptian, reincarnation. I don't know what she's doing, but it isn't human. Part of her isn't human. It's like there are many gods in these plays that actually come down, which I think is special about Shakespeare.
Have
you ever
watching
played
that.
God?
I'm sorry?
Have you played a god?
Yes, I have, as a matter of fact. I played Hymen in As You Like It. And I will tell you, that was Paul Barnes, who directed that, and he was actually the director of Merry Wives of Windsor this summer.
Yep.
This was a production at Pioneer Theater Company up north in Salt Lake. And I remember we had a lot of conversation about what was Hymen. I mean, yes, a god coming down and not fixing everything necessarily, but putting everything right. And I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, just a quick fun thing. In trying to interpret the god, they put this wig on me that was supposed to be, I think, a cherub-like wig, and, you know, put me in this kind of god-like robe, a mixture of a toga and, you know, a dish towel that had been pulled out from somewhere. And
Oh, dear.
I walked out the very first time, and I looked a little bit like Harpo Marx in a rejected Halloween outfit. And
Yes.
the entire cast just lost it. And I'll never forget
Yeah.
the look of dry humor on Paul's face as he just leaned to the costume designer and said, no.
No, honey, no.
Right.
That's funny. Well, I mean, they had a crane on the above in the globe to lower the gods with a winch, you know, and a trap for the evil ones to come up from below.
And they even called
very
it the heavens,
representative
didn't they?
Yeah, sure, they did. They did, and you know, we do that a little bit, but ours is all reversed. Instead of having people standing for a penny at the edge of the stage, we have the richest donors sleeping in the front row.
Yeah,
I don't know. It got mixed up.
the front row is
But
always
the
my
eagerness,
favorite.
I know. I stood at the Globe and watched Mark Rylance do Hamlet from the
Oh, my gosh.
from the front. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
talking about some gender crossing, he won the Tony, 3 years ago for playing Olivia in Twelfth Night on Broadway?
Yes, I saw that a few times. He played that for years.
He's, I think, one of the best actors we have right now.
Yes.
He's amazing.
Yes, yes, everyone agrees. It's true. And he's always working, which is always helpful. I mean, that's the thing about letting women play on stage. Like, if you never get to do a sword fight, God help you, you know, when you have 2.5 weeks rehearsal for Joan of Arc. I mean, we have Tracy Lane, who's fantastic, and she can do it, but most women, you need some, I mean, everybody needs a chance to work out. And the same is true with text, right?
Absolutely.
You have to be able to organize a Mortimer speech for 5 minutes and build, you know, a La Salique. It's very difficult. Sorry, I'm being a nerd, but
No,
some
that's
of the
okay.
speeches just they don't shape themselves. You have to kind of build a staircase to heaven, and it makes you think. I think it's great.
Well,
You know, it's great. It's like playing Scrabble. It used to be fun to just build words together.
I'll tell you, Lisa, you apologize for being a nerd, and I say thank you so much for being a nerd. This is actually my heaven, I'll tell you, talking about stuff like this.
Yay, me too.
I do have a theatrical question for you that's not necessarily language-based, but you've played, you know, great roles, Shylock and Hamlet and Iago. And by the way, you mentioned earlier Ian McKellen and how in several other names, but Ian McKellen stood out. I do tell my students now, if you want a who's who of some of the great Shakespearean actors, watch a Harry Potter movie or Lord of the Rings, and you're going to see most of them somewhere.
Yeah.
But you're playing Shylock with a mustache, with an image of a male character. And yet you mentioned earlier in Henry VI, Part 1, you're playing Lady Lucy, and it's actually written as Lucy. What is your criteria for deciding? Are you going to play it as a man? Are you going to play it as a woman? Is there a criteria that you use, or is it just a gut?
Well, if I was directing, I would certainly do a close read of the play and try to figure out how regendering it, meaning playing a male character as a female, might affect everything along the way. It's like those time travel stories where you can't alter one thing because it changes everything for everybody. Once I played Hamlet, and a woman was cast as Rosencrantz, which meant at the end of the play I had to kill her. And that's a different Hamlet who would kill a friend that he may even have slept with at Wittenberg and say, it doesn't matter to me, she was trying to kill me. And I know women are just as capable as murder as men, but generally it's the men who are doing these things. So if you have a statistic, let's say, we know that over 50% of the murders in the world are committed by men in domestic relationships over sexual jealousy. And therefore, a play like Othello resonates forever with everybody because that's generally something that actually happens, you know?
Right.
And then, you know, there's the rare occasion where you have a Medea where a woman just goes nuts. and kills her kids to try to make somebody feel as bad as she feels. But it's not 50% of the murders of the children of the world. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I just think it resonates. If you regender something, I played Antonia in The Tempest for Orlando Shakespeare, and in that play, Antonio tries to murder his brother, and when it's a woman, and at the end of the play, Prospero says to that person, "I forgive you for your ambition." That's just unique. And there are no female ambitious characters that are forgiven for their ambition and their desire toward power.
Right.
There are none. They all have to be strangled or commit suicide or be suffocated or die, and or go mad, and they can't retain power. And that's the sort of a man would play that crazy Lady M who had to disintegrate. A man would play that half-broken Ophelia who had to drown herself. You know what I mean?
Right.
That Lavinia who had to be scrubbed because she was so foul and shamed. But their interpretations are limited. And at a certain point, someone like me, any of us, at a certain point we have to say, should we even do The Merchant of Venice or Taming of the Shrew ever again? Should we even do, Henry V? But thank God for the epilogues and the windows toward, the big quest, the questions. What are we considering in terms of the consequences of our behavior? Are we considering the afterlife? Are we considering our communities and our children? What is it that will save us from this endless cycle of revenge? And also, what do we think is funny? And it's very hard to do a play like Love's Labor's Lost because there aren't enough geeks like us.
Like you and me out there.
Nobody else wants to listen to that. I don't even want to hear it. I cut most of it. It's like, this doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
But when I talk to the 9-year-olds who are doing Merchant of Venice, they're just alive and alight, and they're, absolutely sure it's totally relevant and very, very important to do. It's also really fun, and like we said earlier, it gets your blood moving and makes you smarter.
And I think I agree absolutely. We've talked a lot about Shakespeare, Lisa, but in looking over your biography, which is pretty amazing, I have to say, you've got a list of credits as long as my arm and probably the arms of several of my friends here. But you've also done other playwrights and such. I noticed you've done a lot of, or a good amount of Chekhov as well. Do you get the same kind of joy working with other playwrights?
I got to do Paulina in the Seagull for Libby Apple at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and it was beautiful because it was a small ensemble in a beautiful stage, and Libby has directed more Chekhov than any other woman on the planet. And I would write internal monologues for myself while I just stood and watched. After 20 years in my own company of playing things like Hamlet, which go on for 1,500 lines, I had very few lines, but to be able to stand and listen was a beautiful kind of, I think stillness is the mastery. If I could ever stop gesticulating wildly on stage, I'd be a better actor. But stillness is usually the key to something profound, and Chekhov has a great stillness in it, as well as comedy. I mean, I did clown for, years in New York, and stopped doing Shakespeare and new plays altogether just to train my body and just to kind of try to figure out why I couldn't get to that levity. I can always do gravitas, but I can't always do the levity.
Well, in looking at your bio and your webpage, there are pictures of you teaching clowning and such in New York. How do you feel about teaching? Why did you get into that? Do you do it regularly? What is your role as a teacher?
Well, try to be the person that I needed when I grew up. My teachers were fantastic. My clown teacher was a genius. And it's closely related to the esoteric wisdom and the mysteries that we talked about in terms of busting open secrets. That's a lot of what the Shakespeare plays really are about. So if you want to look at them, they're prismatic, and there's a lot of different kind of alchemical symbology and stuff about evolving your arts culture into something that has a divine spark. Stuff about evolving language so that you can actually connect to people in a way that uplifts the community. And a lot of that is physical, the way energy runs through the body and what the psychophysical blocks are. So as a teacher, and I teach all over the world, the danger is the cell phone, and you see people's heads dipping down when they look for what it is they need to know, as though it's in their gizmo, when it's actually in their hearts and in their legs. And And I was trained a long time ago when you sort of dance the text with your body. So I can bring that. I've taught in 20 or 30 universities, and directed all over the place in universities. And it's a joy. I mean, it's a different kind of joy working with you and people who are actually already well-trained masters who can handle themselves and deliver these articulate, eloquent passages. I'm really happy being around the Utah Shakespeare Festival actors who are so good at text and move so well and are so great at the fights and the clowning, and it's really and the singers. I guess it goes from the bassist, which is this grunting inchoate modernity, to violence, and then above that is prose, and above that is poetry, and above that is music and dance. So this ascending ladder of the capacity to flow artistically into joy out of a place of chaos and muck is patterned in the plays, and we do it every day. We get up and have coffee, and then by 8 p.m. we're at our best. We have to kind of bloom up and offer these ancient gifts. I think it's like being an acolyte or a disciple, don't you think, in a way?
Absolutely. And I keep going back to the statements you made about angels and things of that sort. And, I've never put together angle and angel. That's still something I'm chewing on right now. You have quite a resume as far as the theaters in America that you've worked at, but you mentioned international. Do you find that there are any differences amongst people internationally and us? And what are those differences? Or do you find people are all exactly the same with this stuff?
No, everybody's different. Yeah. And you have to come out of their culture. In Vancouver, I directed the first all-female Shakespeare and was able to include some First Nations people in it. Hello, are you still there?
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think a call is trying to break in. Sorry.
Tell them to wait.
Anyway, so in Vancouver, there were a lot of Asian actors and First Nations actors that influenced the production. And in Prague, we had people from all over the world who might be doing Shakespeare usually in Swedish, but came to this English-speaking international company and performed in English as their third or fourth language. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the way that they use the cleverness of the English language is not the same as a native speaker, and the musicality of them doing it in Georgian or in Czech or in Spanish is fantastic. I was just about to do a project where I thread Spanish translation through Othello for a show I'm directing, because the audience has a lot of Spanish-speaking people in it, and because there's some really great poets who translate Shakespeare, and because I speak Spanish fluently, and so do some of my actor friends. So we can offer something of an international blend, which reaches more people, which is great.
Absolutely.
So no, it's not. People are not the same everywhere. I saw an all-white Othello in Prague that flipped my cookies, but for Prague, where they don't have any black people living there, that was their way. And in the international conferences, I see Russians dancing Romeo and Juliet without a word of Shakespeare, and that's their Shakespeare, and you do not argue with them about it's not Shakespeare, it's just a story you're dancing. They say, no, this is our Shakespeare. And if I said that to you, you'd be offended. So, it's learning diplomacy, and also, who was it? Somebody was telling me at a beautiful production of Othello where it was two white people, but they danced toward each other through water, and then she reached down into the water and pulled up mud and painted it on him.
Oh, wow.
And he became mud-covered through this amazing elemental effort. And so it was beyond being human. It was an interesting sort of making things out of clay kind of genesis of a fall of a human being through foolishness, which is a story we tell over and over again.
That actually sounds fascinating. I was over in England when the Royal Shakespeare Company was doing the entire canon, and they had invited a lot of companies from around the world to do some work. And one of the most powerful Shakespeare productions I have ever seen was Titus Andronicus being performed by the Ninagawa Japanese company. And
Mm.
luckily, I did know the play. They did have super titles above to show what was being said. But the passion and the movement and the creation of the story blew me away. It was more than I had ever seen before. And of course, that's a play that you have to go to extremes to understand the nuances of it. And boy, their style just brought it to life. It was powerful. It lives with me to this day.
Oh, I've seen some amazing Japanese performances. Their physical training, their rigor, the beauty of their aesthetics. I mean, I've seen some amazing things, and also like the vigor of a Polish war play, or the poetry of an Irish ballad. It's just great to travel and to hear different actors. Once I was at the Globe, and Mark Rylance stood on one side of the stage, and the leading actor from the Polish theater stood on the other side of the stage. And the Polish prince was there, and the English prince was there in the audience. And the men went line for line through To Be or Not to Be in their own languages.
Oh, wow.
Utterly different men. And things like that with an audience that come from all over the world, that are speaking German and Japanese and English, and they're all skin colors. That's what astonishes me, is how Shakespeare can be so globally loved. But certainly not the only art form. But just since I am a Shakespeare geek, there's nowhere that I go that there's not a tribe member to welcome us,
Right. Well, there's a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream out there. I believe it's Polish. I need to do some research to find it. I watched it when I was in graduate school at the University of Delaware. And it was done actually in many different languages. And every single character was a different religious background or a different philosophical background or even from a different country. You had Lysander, who was a very devout Hasidic Jew. And then, of course, you had even Puck, who was actually a Catholic minister. And they were just playing with all of these different things. Some of the characters spoke in Spanish. Some of the characters spoke in Polish. As a matter of fact, the Duke was 6 different actors working 6 different aspects of the character. It was absolutely fascinating. And what was interesting is even though I couldn't understand the languages, I got Shakespeare. I got the story very clearly. That's where I need to try and find that production again to show you on that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Lisa, we talked about the things you've done, and we've only scratched the surface of your biography and the work you've done, and also the contribution that you've made to not only Shakespeare geeks like myself, but the world and the community and those 25,000 kids that actually saw Shakespeare. What do you want to do next?
Well, this spring I'm directing As You Like It in Wisconsin, and I'm directing an all-female Othello in Arizona for Betsy Mogavero and for Quinn, her husband, for Southwest Shakespeare.
Oh, fantastic.
And then I want to do Richard II. I want to do it internationally. I have groups of friends in London and in Prague, and I'd like to get some grant money together. I'd like to play Richard II.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
then I'd like to use my international friends to gather around and create 2 different companies with some of the same people. So I'm interested in that. I'm off to London to teach cross-gender Shakespeare at the end of September. I've been to London a lot, and I've been to the Edinburgh Festival 4 times. And I really like the traveling festival circuit for reasons that you and I have already discussed in this hour.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fun of and the new material, the new aesthetics that one sees. And I think traveling is basically my bucket list now, so I'm doing a lot of it. I just love to travel. And if I can travel and work at the same time, then it's affordable.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you, if I knew how to do subliminal messages on the radio, I just very well might throw out things like Bolingbroke and also the names Michael Harding just out there. And I want to let you know, I can make things available Bolingbroke, very quickly. And this is my name, Michael Harding. I'm the host of this show. I do know the role of Bolingbroke. Okay, is that enough? Have I made that clear?
If you bring your shiny armor, we can talk about it.
You gotcha. I'll pay the festival what I need. No, but that's, Lisa.
No, I think that's fun. And that's, if I can build a modular production, then I could come, here, if you're teaching here, and then we could build it with the SUU students and yourself, and we could do a project here, and I would already know my part, so I could, direct it.
Just plug yourself in. Lisa, I'm afraid...
That's what I usually do.
We've run out of time, Lisa. I've been having a fantastic time talking to you, and I cannot emphasize enough how much I've enjoyed working with you this summer and getting to know you, and sharing a little bit of the wonderful person that you are with Southern Utah here. Um,
Thank you, Michael. It's been a joy working with you, and congratulations on starting your show up again, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. And Lisa, I'll see you in just a few hours as we put on Henry Six Part 1.
All right, I'll see you there. Thanks, Mike.
And ladies and gentlemen, that was my very good friend Lisa Wolpe, a fellow actor and someone who has inspired me, certainly. She is one of many that I've had the pleasure of working with over an almost 3-decade career. I want to let you know that on the Arts, we're going to be having a lot of different guests that are not only actors, but we're also going to be having people who run these theaters, who curate these museums. We're going to have some painters. We're going to have people who sculpt. We're going to have all sorts of artists, literary artists, writers. These are all fascinating, fascinating people who are doing some wonderful, amazing work here in Southern Utah. And it is our job to do some hardcore investigative journalism and blow the lid off of these wonderful artistic secrets that are here in Southern Utah. Thank you very much for joining us on Thursday at 4 o'clock. We'll be talking to Jamie Young, the executive director of Brigham's Playhouse here in St. George. And until then, enjoy